Cancer Thriver, Gretchen shares the message of the internal work that allows us to break the chains of past trauma, lack of self love, and understanding that we have the power to change our lives. Her mom taught her not to build a mountain around bad things that happen so she wouldn't become a victim of her circumstances. She wants she wants people to understand that to reach any goal, the work starts on the inside.
Welcome to Awakening Soul Divinity, your sacred space for deep healing and transformation. Listen to inspiring conversations with healing experts, spiritual guides, and teachers as we explore ancient wisdom, modern healing, and powerful stories of change. I'll also share practical insights from my personal journey, from spiritual crisis to inner purpose. Whether you're seeking to overcome anxiety, embrace your true nature, or awaken your higher self, this podcast offers guidance to help you transform your life and elevate collective consciousness.
Hey, Gretchen, welcome. I'm really excited that you decided to join me on this journey.
I am thrilled to be on your show and to have a discussion around all of this. This is really exciting. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. So let's just jump right in. Can you briefly share a catalyst or adversity or some kind of challenging experience that led you to the path you're on today?
Sure. So, I'm a three-time cancer survivor, which you would think would be enough catalyst to do something, but I don't think it really was. It wasn't until I was in my mid to late 50s, I was diagnosed diabetic, and that gutted me more so than the cancer diagnoses, even though the second time I was stage 4. And the reason it was so impactful for me and was such a catalyst is because I'd been watching my younger brother, who had been diagnosed diabetic about 10 years earlier. I'd been watching him struggle with diabetes, and he'd already lost a limb to amputation, and he also was on dialysis. And I knew, because I was so involved in his care and we were so close, that that was my future
Mm-hmm.
if I didn't do something. And so I'd been overweight, obese, morbidly obese pretty much my entire life, though at different moments, like a lot of people, I'd lost a certain amount of weight, but I always gained it back. And one of the things that happened when I was diagnosed diabetic was that I realized, because 3 months earlier I wasn't diabetic, and then now I was diabetic, that I had time.
Mm-hmm.
That was something I knew my brother did not have. And in fact, 3 months later, he died. And I thought, I know what my future is going to look like if I don't do something permanent to protect myself. And I didn't want to put my husband and my daughter and my grandkids through, losing limbs and getting sicker. I wanted to focus on the things I knew I could do something about. Some of it I couldn't, but I would have felt really guilty if I could have done something and I didn't. So that's what started this whole thing. And then I realized that I had to start working on why I was self-soothing with food in the first place, that the weight was a symptom. And if I really wanted to make some permanent changes, I had to start doing a bunch of inside work. And that's really when that moment happened. And that was over 4 years ago.
Wow. So that's not a lot of time. And it's interesting that you say that because, for me, 4 years ago was also a drop into the first slide into the dark night of the soul. So it seems to me that the last 4 years for a lot of people have been um, an opening inside. And I appreciate that you brought that up because I think that inside is where, well, I think I've learned for myself as well that the inside is like that's where we keep everything. That's where and we're energetic beings, so, and magnetic as well, so we attract whatever we are. And so you're right. I mean, that's very, I love that. I honor that you were able to take a look at that and make a decision from that. And how, with all of that went on, how did your personal healing journey shape the work you do now to support others?
So, I like probably a whole lot of people, when things go wrong in our lives, there is a tendency to look externally,
Mm,
right? We didn't get the job we wanted. Whose fault was that? Well, it wasn't ours. It was obviously the universe uh, against us, or somebody didn't like us, or I didn't lose weight because of somebody or something.
mm,
And I was finally starting to figure things out, to realize that no matter what was happening on the outside, it was being directed by what was going on the inside.
right.
And that was a really big epiphany for me. I didn't realize I had that kind of power
Hmm.
and control over my world. One of the biggest epiphanies I had was while I was writing my book, was I realized that I had, over the course of my life, spent more time and effort and energy helping other people achieve their dreams than I put into my own.
I know what that feels like.
Well, I mean, that's a really big thing to realize. That's
Yeah.
very, complex. And so when I started doing my journey and I was having all these epiphanies, I'm like, holy smokes. I think I need to let other people know that A, they have more power than they think they do.
Mhm.
B, however you feel about yourself gets magnified, and teaches other people how to treat you. And so then I just started talking about it because I had to process it. This stuff was really life-changing for me. And I thought of, I'm pretty smart and I'm not sure why I didn't know any of this. So that's why I'm trying to share it with
Yeah.
others, because, we knock our heads against the wall a lot, and we're not going to get the outcome we want. We're not going to get the life that we want. We're not going to reach the goals we want if we keep doing the same thing and not look internally to figure out what's going on there,
Yeah.
that we're not able to achieve whatever it is we're looking to do. So, that's why I wrote the book. That's why I have my own podcast. And that's what I really do talk to people about, is no matter what's going on in your life, if it's not where you want to be, look inward,
Hmm.
not outward,
Yeah. Can you
which is
share?
easier said than done, by the way.
Oh, so say that one more time.
I said it's easier said than
Oh,
done.
100%. And it's harder said than done.
Yeah, it's
At the
really,
same,
it
it's a
is, but it's
dichotomy.
worth it.
It's worth it, and it's a dichot. It's like two sides of one coin. We're the
Yeah,
coin.
yeah,
Yeah. Can
for
you
sure.
can you let us know what the name of the book is, and I'll put that in the description so people can find it.
Sure, it's called The Work in Between, a memoir about stepping out of my shadows. The podcast is called The Work in Between as well. We're getting ready to launch season 3. And it really, the reason it's called that is because in our culture, we really celebrate those before and after pictures, right? If somebody has had a major
Mhm.
physical transformation, we love to see that before picture and that after picture. And I have really powerful pictures that document the whole transformation. But what we don't talk about is the work in between that before picture and that after picture.
Mhm.
And so that's why I call it that. That's why I call my podcast that, because we're not focusing on the outcome. We're
Mhm.
focusing on the work.
Mhm.
And while it can be tedious and it can be hard and it can be frustrating and you can think you're not making any progress, but you are, um, that's why I focus on that, because I think that's where the emphasis needs to be, more so than on that outcome that everybody likes to focus on.
Sure. Well, there's well, I don't know about beauty, but there's like this. certain energy of going into it and taking the before picture where you're all excited and you're getting ready to go on this healing journey, and all that energy that comes from that piece of it, and then you have the results. But what I've noticed, and I wanted to share this because I had a picture taken of me at one point during my dark nights of the soul over the last 4 years. um I remember I was doing in 2020, I was doing a what is Tony Robbins UPW? What is that?
I don't know. I know Tony Robbins' work, but I
Yeah,
don't
well, it's
know
his
what it
his
is.
like initial thing that you come in that you can do. And I can't think of the name of it right now, and that's okay. But we did that, and it was online. It was the first one that was online, so we weren't out in front of people, so it was a little easier. Nobody could see me. I did have a friend of mine with me at the time, and but what was interesting was at one point he was doing his like neuro linguistic programming work, and he had all these things going on, and I was just pushing intentionally. I was being intentional, but I was like sweating, snotting, and crying all at the same time, trying to get all this stuff out. And I remember during that process, I just stuck my hands on my face and I just went like this and I just mixed it all together. And by the time I get done, I was like, yeah, because it felt, I mean, that's the work in between. That's the dark night of the soul. That's crying and crashing on the floor. That's doing all that. And it doesn't sound wonderful, but let me tell you, when you're in the middle of doing that, it feels not great. But when you get to the other side of that 6 minutes, seems like to me, then it's like this whole entire thing, glob of muck gets lifted off of you, and you start to feel the differences that are starting to bring you to that end result, or next result, whatever that is. And that was powerful for me. So I think it's really cool that you named it this and you focused on this, because it can be challenging and it can be painful, and it's probably the best thing that I've ever done in my entire life. So I get that. I hear what you're saying. That's just a beautiful way of expressing it. I think the way you worded that. So thank you for that.
Well, thank you. I had my breakthroughs, through therapy, through coaching, driving down the road, however. And what I realized was that, all the traumas that happen to us, our bodies remember. Even if we don't, our bodies do.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't always even know what baggage we are carrying around, right? That are really weighing us down. And so one of the big things for me was, my brother had passed away about 3 months after I started my weight loss journey.
Mm-hmm.
And I found toward the end of the year, about 6 months later, I found myself incredibly angry.
Mm-hmm.
And I was acting out a little bit, and even at work, which was highly out of character for me. So I thought I need to go talk to somebody. And when I did, within 30 seconds, I mean, I was sobbing uncontrollably. And throughout the process, what I realized was, one, I was suffering from an extreme case of survivor's guilt because I was the last one standing.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But it wasn't just because I was the only one standing from my original nuclear family. It was also because I'd had cancer 3 times and I was still here. I felt guilty about that. I felt guilty about all sorts of things.
Mm-hmm.
And once I realized that a lot of why I was feeling the way I was survivor's guilt, it's not that it went away. What I was able to do is label it and kind of put it away so that when it showed back up, I went, oh, okay, that's what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's hard to navigate life when you don't know and you can't label what you are experiencing. And we tend to clump it all together in I'm angry, I'm sad, I'm hurt, I'm whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes in fact, oftentimes it's a lot more complicated than that. And so we have to address those traumas. And there were just things that I thought I had dealt with, but apparently I had not. And
Mhm.
so from writing the book, from talking to a therapist, from working with a coach, certain things would come up and I would just be sobbing as I was writing about it or talking about it.
Yeah.
But it is incredibly cathartic.
Yeah.
And that helped me take the next step. Am I still doing all that work? Sure. I
Sure.
probably always will.
Always.
But, I'm not carrying that all around with me
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
I'm
And
carrying other stuff yet, but that stuff
well,
I'm not carrying
it's a
around.
journey. It's always a journey. That's why we're here to experience the journey, and being a human, these are the
Yeah,
types of things that we experience, right?
yeah.
And you had the way you were talking brought up something that I remember you had mentioned and some things that you shared with me. It definitely sounds like grief. All the things that you were walking through sounds like grief. Grief is not like the list of I do this and then I do this and then I do this and then I do this. Grief is circular. There's no line. There's no line to it. And also, the grief can involve not only sadness and anger and fear and all that kind of stuff, but it also involves laughter. It involves all kinds of things. It's like when you have a memory and then you're just sitting bawling and all of a sudden you start laughing like hysterically for no reason. You don't even what the heck's going on. We're not explained grief, especially in the US. We don't necessarily, it's getting better, but we have not necessarily understood exactly what it is. And 9 times out of 10, grief happens to be something that we experience with loss, any type of loss. And it's there to help us work through that experience.
Yeah.
But most of us are taught to stuff all those things down. So we don't grieve. And then when something major happens, we don't know what to do with it. So would you are you open to sharing a little bit about your journey with grief and in that process?
Yeah, so I've dealt with a lot of grief. I lost my older brother when he was 32.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, I was 30 years old, and that was the same year that I was diagnosed with cancer the first time, the same year that my mom and dad divorced after 30 plus years of marriage, the same year that my aunt buried three of her five boys, all in their 30s. That was a significant year for grief. And you think you've dealt with all of it, and losing Chris was probably the first really big loss that I had felt. And
This was your
you know,
your older
my older
brother. The
brother,
other one you mentioned was your younger brother, right?
yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
just want to clear that
So
up because
yeah, Chris passed when he was 32, and he was a hemophiliac and had spent a lot of his life in and out of hospitals for all sorts of reasons. And so we knew how precarious life was, but when we lost him, I mean, that's hard to fathom, right? Because he was very, very young. So I started losing people who were really important to me at a relatively young age. And then, I don't know, in 2015, we lost dad. We were able to be with him when he passed. And then 6 months later, mom died unexpectedly. And then it was just Eric and me, and super close. We always were. And I knew when Eric died and I knew his health was declining, that it would gut me. I tried to balance living life in the present, but I spent many, many years because he had a lot of health problems with the phone by my bed and checking the phone multiple times to see if I had a message from him or the doctor was calling, and I spent a lot of time flying home and navigating, his health issues as his advocate, and spent an inordinate amount of time with him, which I treasure to this day. But when I lost Eric, that took me to a place that no other grief had ever taken me, because I was it was so overwhelming and I was so sad
Mhm.
and I was so angry and I felt so guilty. And I mean, every emotion you can think of was heightened.
Mhm.
And it was so bad that and it was during COVID and Eric died of COVID. But he didn't have much time left anyway because dialysis was just racking his body. When we got up there to Michigan, we were living in Mississippi, uh, and I could hardly get out of the car. And my husband had to hold me as we walked to the gravesite. And I had never felt that amount of overwhelming despair.
Mm.
And it was unlike anything I'd ever dealt with before. Now, granted, I had a lot of family and friends and dear people who were dear to me, but that one just took me a long time to process. And a few months later, we did a celebration of his life, and it was so beautiful and such a celebration. And the one thing all he wanted to do was to come home with me and my husband. And I could never quite make that happen.
Mhm.
And and that's the thing, that was the guilt that I was carrying around with me because I should have tried harder. I should have done something. And that's really hard to carry around,
It's heavy.
because the conversations in my head
Yeah.
were brutal,
Mhm.
just brutal. And so working with a therapist helped me navigate some of those things, that I had to really talk about, because what I have learned from growing up in an alcoholic home, that if I kept it inside, it made me physically ill.
Mhm.
And so I would talk about things that other people found uncomfortable.
Mhm.
Growing up with a dad who drank all the time and maybe came home, maybe didn't come home, was disruptive when he did come home. That was hard growing up, and I'm 100% sure where my self-soothing with food came from, because
Mhm.
you can only be so sad, so angry, so anxious before you got to make yourself feel better.
Right.
And so that's what I did. I ate. But I found that if I talked about these things, even if nobody could fix them, the burden was lightened.
Mhm.
So, because I can't carry this all around in my head, and I still can't. And that's why I'm probably more vocal about some of these things than other people are, because it is healing and healthy for me. And that way, other people can realize, no, there's other people just as messed up. There's people who've gone through just as many really crummy, awful things.
Mhm.
And what I want people to understand is you can go through all of these things and they are awful. And I don't recommend them, but we all have our things, whatever they are. But if you share them, you talk about them, you get out of your head, you can let them go, and lead a really happy, healthy life. But if we just keep carrying them around and keeping them in our heads, and I don't know about you, but my head is a scary place to be. I mean, it's
Yeah. No,
dark,
I get
and
it.
I'm never looking at, the bright side of life when it's in my head. I'm always looking at,
Mhm.
the negative thing. But when I share them, it lightens my burden, and I'm able to recognize all of the good things and the blessings and the happy things going on in my life. And I am no Pollyanna, believe me, I am not. I am a realist. But I also know that we are not made to carry all of these things around by ourselves.
Mm-mm.
That's what we need to connect with other people and share them, because that's how we are human. That's what makes us human. And so those were some lessons that were really hard for me to learn, but in some cases it was really a case of self-preservation.
Yeah.
I had to talk to people about it.
Yeah.
And in the intro, you mentioned, my mom always told me, don't build, bad things happen to everybody, don't build a mountain to it. That really did help me not become a victim every time, where every time something didn't turn out like I wanted, I didn't say, well, I grew up in an alcoholic home.
Right.
I did grow up in an alcoholic home. It did have an impact on my development, but that's not why I'm not achieving what I want to achieve. Why I'm not achieving what I want to achieve is whatever I'm telling myself
Mm-hmm.
on the inside. And
Mm-hmm.
that's very different.
Right. And it's not true either. What we tell ourselves on the inside is usually the voices that we heard that we're reiterating, and we become our
Right.
own worst enemy in doing that.
Yeah.
I want to add a couple of things, like just for the audience to understand about grief. The thing about grief also is that there's no timeline to it. Like you had started, certain types of grief that you've had were shorter, some were longer, or whatever, and that's normal. The challenge comes in when I think they call it aggravated grief or something, where you keep going and you stay stuck in it for many, 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 many years. And you continue to remember the story, and you continue to tell yourself the story. And instead of saying, well, because we're not meant to do that. We're meant to release emotion. And if we don't release emotion, it won't release the story. And when we don't release the story, we can't move forward. And so to remember that although there is no timeline on how you should do it or how long you should do it or any of that kind of thing, there still is a point where if you've been in it for a long time, that you may want to consider finding someone who knows how to relieve or assist in relieving you of that, therapist or coach, or somebody who works in that realm, because it's important to grieve. It's just not good to keep doing it for years and years and years. So because that's where you'll get stuck in life completely, by not doing it, by keeping it inside and not talking to people or asking for help. Or not everyone's a talker like you. I'm on the same page as you are, Gretchen. I like um, talking about getting it out. That was always like, I always used to compare it to, I was raised Jewish, and they had a Yiddish phrase called kvetching. And to me, kvetching was more like venting, as opposed to complaining. It was a vent to get it out, right? And I felt that was really helpful when I did that, when I vented or when I shared. And I always made sure that it's like, I just need you to listen to me. Let me get it out. I'll be fine. Give me a hug after I stop crying, or when I'm crying or whatever, and I'll be good, right? But that's usually how it works. And then also the other piece I wanted to connect with that you said was, um, to we can't carry this stuff by ourselves. It's not meant to be that way. We are naturally um, tribal. Our connections are important, no matter what we've been told or what we've been told to break those connections or any of that stuff. We are naturally a tribal society, and to be with others and to help each other. Like even I remember reading about, women back in the day, they'd come together and they'd be doing their quilting or whatever, and they'd sit there and they'd talk to each other, and and it wasn't anything, it was just, you talked and you're done. You talked and you're done. You talked, and it just went in that process. Now it's like we hardly talk to each other because now we're afraid of being judged or whatever. But that's the point behind. So I think what I'm trying to say here is just ask for the help, look for the support, get it out of your system as much as you can, and work through it where you're not constantly telling the same story that's keeping you stuck. Because by repeating it, that in and of itself keeps us in that space. So I have an interesting question then, with all of what you said to me
Okay.
just now. That's a lot. That's a lot to go through. That's a lot of loss. That's a lot of death. That's a lot of pain. That's a lot. What makes you so strong?
Okay, I get asked that question a lot.
Okay.
And my therapist asked me that on the first day, because I walked in and I gave her the Cliff Note version of everything that had happened. And for a minute she didn't say anything. And then she asked me, she said, wow, that's a lot. What makes you so strong? And it stumped me. I had no idea. I'm like, huh? I don't know. Partly I didn't know how else to be. I think growing up in challenging circumstances, as many people do, we learn survival skills,
Yeah.
right? We learn how to navigate really difficult situations that work really well in those situations, but when we get out in the real world, kind of can trip us up because
Yeah.
it's quite often dysfunctional and people look at you like, what are you doing? Um, Partly I think it was this. Even in all the dysfunction, even in all the loss, even with everything that I've been through, I have experienced an extraordinary amount of love and
Hmm.
support. Um, I was incredibly close to my mom, to my brothers. My dad was a little harder to love, but I was still his little girl. And through my cancer, through Chris's illnesses, through dad's drinking, through everything that happened, we were really tight. And we never had to go through any of those things alone, ever.
Hmm.
And my mom had a big extended family. So aunts and uncles and cousins, I had tons of people who were there to help support us. So we were not grieving alone. We were not going through all the loss alone. We came together, and that was very supportive.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, and we had a lot of joy. I mean, there's lots of great times, lots of great times. It was like most lives, it wasn't all one thing or another. I'm able to recognize a lot of the happy times and the times of great joy. And but throughout my whole life, if I look back over all those things that have happened, I always had support and love and unconditionally at that. So I really believe that's what got me through. Even if I was going through, I was in isolation when I was stage 4 cancer. My family all came to where I was. The first time I was diagnosed, I was living in New York. I was a student. And my mom and 3 of her sisters flew to New York to be with me
Hmm.
when I had to have surgery. When Eric died, my husband and daughter and close family friends I've had for a long time, they stood with me. So I have never, even though there have been a lot of things I've had to go through by myself,
Hmm.
they were standing there with me and they
Hmm.
were holding me up when I could not stand. And I think some folks forget that that's why we're here, is to hold each other up when we cannot stand.
Hmm.
Because I do that for other people, for other friends, for other family. And they did it for me.
Hmm.
So I was blessed beyond measure and still am by
Hmm.
the amount of love that I have in my life. And I think that sometimes people think I should be stronger than this and I should be able to do it by myself. No, there are some things you have to do by yourself, but you don't have to do it alone.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I think that's a really important distinction.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely is. I can't relate because I didn't have family around like in that way, and I know that a lot of the audience from people I've talked to have had that same experience where they don't have that. So, what I would say, and I'm going to ask you as well, a couple of things. One is you're going to isolate to protect yourself because you don't know what it feels like to have that around. And the most important thing to recognize is that there are people out there who are willing to support, even if it isn't your own family, and to go and find these people, because that's you just it just doesn't work. Take it from someone who knows. It doesn't work to try to do any of this kind of work by yourself, because at some point you're going to need that mirror from somebody else, of love, of compassion, of some anything, or even to help you to see where you're at. So finding that support is very important. And then also too, on the note of the love, and being able to experience all of that love for you, can you kind of share, knowing what kind of audience is potentially out there, how do you, somebody like me, okay, if it's somebody who didn't have that, do you have any suggestions on how to still live a joy-filled life even though they've got these hard experiences and they don't have a support system at the same time?
And so, you know, it does, some people who have grown up or don't have the relationship with their families like I did, it's, we know sometimes it's better to not have relationships with our families, right? Because sometimes the families are not healthy and they do more damage than they do good. But families aren't just biological
Mm-hmm.
by any means at all. I mean, I have friends who I've had for a long time who I do sincerely consider family, and they would be there for me and have been there for me, and vice versa. I think one of the things that we forget is not only how wonderful it is when people step into our light and help us, hold us up when we need it, but how wonderful it feels when we do that for other people. And it doesn't matter if you're biologically related or not. In fact, I think there's something really powerful when you choose, when you intentionally choose people to
Yeah.
bring into your life because they make your life a better place to be. And I've often said, look, that's my criteria now. You have to make my life a better place to be, or there's no reason for us to be in each other's lives.
Mm-hmm.
But conversely, if I don't make their lives a better place to be, there's no reason for me to be in their lives either.
Right.
So I think when we intentionally find our people, and we all have to find our people, and it changes over time,
Mm-hmm.
right? As we become more self-aware, as we move through this life, we will be attracted to different people, different, I think that, I have a lot of angels surrounding me and people who come into my life for, sometimes it's for a very brief moment, but they do something that only they could do.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to believe I'm doing the same for others, right? And it's an amazing feeling when people lift you up, but it's also an amazing feeling when you lift others up. And I think we forget the
Yeah.
reciprocity that goes with the commitment to connecting with one another.
Yeah.
And that to me is where the magic happens. It can be quiet, it can be subtle, but it can be really powerful.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're going through some hard things and you don't feel like your family can be there for you, find your people, and you've got to be intentional about it. It could be therapists, it could be coaches, it could be somebody at the local YWCA. We all
Yeah.
find people in different places, but
Yeah.
they're there. But we can't shut ourselves down
Mm-hmm.
and not be open to the people who are standing there waiting for you to say, come on in, help me out. Because nobody is going to barge into your life and do that. So
Mm-hmm.
we
Mm-hmm.
have to kind of get outside of ourselves a little bit and look around and go, okay, it's okay. It's not an ego thing. We all, every one of us, I don't care who you are, we need help sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes we're the helpers, sometimes we need the help. But nobody gets through this life without needing help at some point. And some of us way more than others.
Mm-hmm.
And that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
It's healthy.
Yeah, yeah, and there is a point, like if you've been traumatized in let's say macro traumas, that there's a fear of even approaching that idea. I had that personally when I was going through 2 years ago when I was almost homeless, and everything, that the dark night of my soul, whatever, for the 4 years. But that was like the turning point. And I'm a helper. I like helping other people. I like being there for other people and supporting them and everything. And for me to ask for help was like, nah, I don't think so, but I had to drop whatever it was that was stopping me from doing that and do it, because if I hadn't, I wouldn't be where I'm at right now. So, I mean, please take into consideration that, isolating to recenter and come back to yourself is one thing. Isolating to hide from everything and try to do everything on your own and be lonely and alone is a whole different ball game. And it's not an easy thing, but it's something that definitely requires some some consideration to break through that fear of asking for that help. So I would put that out there, to people who are listening who are in that spot, who are afraid of that, because there are people out there, believe it or not, that will help. And I'm that proof of asking the right person. So yeah, thank you. Um,
Yeah, I do want to say that I know that it's a real shot to your ego
mm,
when you have to ask for help, right? It's
yeah.
embarrassing. It is humiliating sometimes, all of those things. But if you think about what's the alternative,
Mm-hmm.
right? You're going to not only stay where you are, it will get worse.
Mm-hmm.
And so we all have choices every day. We have choices. And some of the hardest questions I've had to ask people to help with are the things that help me move forward the most.
Mm-hmm.
And so, to me, it's an act of self-abuse
Yeah.
to not allow yourself to ask questions and ask for help and try to get yourself where you want to be.
Mm-hmm.
It's those self-limiting thoughts, those lies that we tell ourselves to keep us wherever we are. And most of what we tell ourselves is not true. What
Mm-hmm.
we tell ourselves about ourselves, not true. And if we don't ever bounce those things off other people, we just keep believing them, and they keep perpetuating, and they keep keeping us where we are. And so I think that when we reach out, when we are most vulnerable, those are the connections that make us also feel most human, right? Because we feel them deeply. And we don't get to go through this world and just stay surfacey all the time. That's not why we're here. I
Mm-mm.
think that it's those deep connections that come from those moments of vulnerability and fear and all of those things. That's what, even though they're painful, but so is staying in that place.
Mm-hmm.
It is worth it. Because I promise you, if you reach out and you ask for help, they're not going to let you fall.
Mm-mm. And that also, just another shot of information from my own experience is, for years I asked the wrong people for help,
Yeah. Yeah.
and always got shot down, or always got looked at like, well, you're not being tough enough, or why are you complaining, or why are you this, or why are you that. And then that kept me from asking anybody at a certain point, because I thought everybody was like that. And then when I finally built up the bravery or the courage to ask the right people, I remember when this 2 years ago when I did do that, and it was during that time with the, almost becoming homeless. And I called a friend of mine and I told him, like, I had been in depression for 10 days and sleeping for 20 hours, not eating, the whole thing. And I called him up and I said, I don't know how to get out of this. I just, I'm not, I don't know how to get out of this. And he said, just hang tight. And I'm like, what? He said, hang tight. I will have someone on the phone with you within 20 minutes. And sure enough, this person who was part of my process of climbing out of this hole was on the phone with me for 3 days straight. That first day was 2.5 hours. Complete stranger, never met him in my entire life, had no idea who he was. And he's on the other end of the phone asking me questions and listening and letting me cry and letting me walk through this where I didn't get that from people that I thought would support me. And the because I thought they would support me because I love them and they love me in some way. And it was like but when it was like this feeling of, I can't even really describe it. It was like everything just kind of fell off, and somebody's out there who will listen to me, somebody out there who's willing to help me walk through this and guide me without sitting there saying, well, you got to do it this way and you got to do it this way and let's start over here, which had nothing to do. I just needed somebody to listen to the emotional piece of it at the beginning. And I kept getting people who were like, nope, let's talk about how we can find you a job and get you money and all these kinds of things. And it was a few people who did that. And that's not what I needed in the moment. I just needed someone to listen to me for 2.5 hours, apparently, for those 3 days. But yeah, so it's always about finding the right people when you're looking for that. So
sometimes if your family is part of the reason you're struggling, they're not going to be necessarily the right ones to do that anyway. Sometimes they are, but people aren't always well prepared or have the right skill set to help you get out, because we know with our families that if you're, for example, if you come from a family who everybody is overweight and you're trying to lose weight,
it's not.
the advice you are getting from them often is very self-serving for them.
Yeah.
And so it's not necessarily going to be the healthiest advice that you need.
Yeah.
There's lots of families who are, sabotage each other willingly or not. I don't know. Maybe they don't know. Sometimes they do. But the fact is, sometimes you have to step away and go to other people, the coaches, the therapists, the counselors, the whatevers. And because they don't know you, they're not going to come in with all these preconceived expectations and ideas about who you are or what you should be doing. They don't know. So, the biggest thing I think we struggle with in our society is that lack of human connection, like real connection. And people are really lonely. And we need people to listen to us. And we need to listen to other people. And I was with a friend recently who had gotten a little bit isolated. And then when we all kind of met up recently, she said, I had forgotten how loved I was. Well, if you don't if you're not able to surround yourself with people who care for you, you do forget. You do forget.
Yeah.
We all need to be reminded about how special we are, and how loved we are, wherever that comes from. But I think that it's just so easy to forget. And that's sad.
Yeah. Yeah. So from your perspective, how do you see individual healing work contributing to the larger societal transformation that's going on right now?
I think there's a lot of people who are hurting.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a lot of people who are scared. I think, and I don't care what side of anything you're on, I think there's a lot of people who have felt that they've been forgotten, that what matters to them are being minimized or villainized, that we quit talking to each other. And I don't think social media has helped at all. I think that it has made everything exponentially more difficult because it's easy to hide, certainly behind the social media. I think that there's there's a lot of us that really do need to look at what's going on inside, because however we feel inside, and I truly believe this, however we feel on the inside is how we treat people on the outside, right? So one way that I have kind of refocused how I'm looking at the world now is very divisive. It's
Mhm.
scary. I don't see anybody who's happy. I mean, I really don't. I don't think there's anybody walking around going, this is awesome. This is not really. And so I think one of the things that we might need to do is when we engage with people who are spewing a lot of hatred or a lot of angst or volatile language, you know, they're hurting. They have to be, because that's not how we act when we're happy. And I think there's a lot of fear that is driving everything that's going on.
Mhm.
And, one of the things that I think we have to do more of, as hard as it is to be more compassionate. I think compassion is what is going to get us out of this, is compassion.
There's that. Yeah. Hmm.
I really do. I
Yeah.
don't, because I can't fix what's going on. But I think the healthier I feel individually, the more I look to myself and work on my own issues, the better I am able to interact with other people. And if we don't ever question our beliefs, our attitudes, our how the world works, then nothing changes. And so, when I was a professor, one of the things I would say to my students is, look, to me, education equals transformation. I think it's more complicated than that. And I would always say, by the end of the semester, some of us are going to be transformed. Whether it's you or me, I don't know. But let's
Hmm.
all be open to it, because we all walk through this world with preconceived ideas about how the world works. And all of us should be walking through this world, leaving the window open about, well, maybe it's not exactly everything that I think. And if we could help each other do that,
Hmm.
I think we'd make some progress.
Yeah. Well, the big question, what if?
Yeah.
I like that what if. What if it was like this? What if
Well,
things were like whatever?
yeah,
I like using that word. And then I also wanted to add in, what's inside comes out, period.
almost.
So hurt people. And
Yeah,
healed people heal people.
yeah.
And for people who don't recognize that, I mean, there's not much that can be done with that, because we aren't here to save everybody, but we are here to start talking to each other and to start connecting with each other and to start doing the best that we can with each other from whatever space we're at, I feel.
No, I
Yeah.
agree. And I think it starts one-on-one, and
Hmm.
it starts face to face.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, absolutely. When you don't, I mean, we're taught a lot, all of us have been taught in one way, shape, or form hatred or anger or something. Even if it's just a little, somebody poked something, planted a seed in your head. Well, don't you think that person looks weird, or,
yeah.
when we were kids or whatever? But that's not who we are as humans. That's not why we're here. That's not what it's meant to be like. But those,
Don't you think, though, what we're suffering from is a lack of belonging, right? And
yeah,
so
yeah,
I think a lot of people are jumping on different bandwagons because now they feel like they're a part of something.
sure, yeah.
Whereas, communities have splintered, and not because of just political ideologies, but because people move all the time, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
Back when I was growing up, nobody left.
Right.
Everybody stayed in my
Yeah.
hometown,
Yep.
right? And weekends were with family and friends, and nobody ever left. And then people started to leave for work and for school and for whatever. And I know, we've moved constantly for my work. And I think there is a lack of connection that forces people to look inward,
Mhm.
as far as being comfortable just staying there with their thoughts and their beliefs because they're not bouncing them off anybody. They're just kind of isolated.
Mhm.
But I think community has changed. Not everybody's going to church like they used to go. People are not participating in social groups like they used to. A lot of it is online, and the pandemic, we will be having long-term effects from that for centuries, for generations. I mean, that that shifted a lot
Mhm. Mhm.
of thinking and feeling, and nobody knew what to do with that. Nobody had ever been through that before. So I think a lot of it is a lack of community that
Well,
is causing that problem
yeah,
too.
I agree with that. I'd like to throw something out though, because for me, it actually expanded my community. Because I was in such a space where, obviously we weren't allowed to go anywhere for the most
Yeah.
part. And I started to meet people all over the world through that. And it created that community from an extended perspective. Like what I noticed was especially within very small towns and places that people in the US, people have had a tendency not to leave their town. So they never knew what other people were like. Now, for me, I was born in Germany, so I'm very culturally aware of other people and other cultures, who they are. I'm always curious about that. So probably where that came from. But I definitely hear what you're saying as far as the in-person thing. um, what I'd like to see is the pendulum coming to the middle. Like we were over here with it all being community within, who we knew and what we knew and all that kind of stuff. And then we swung over to, nope, not talking to anybody because we're not allowed.
Yeah.
We 6 feet away from everybody and hiding behind, our fear or whatever. But now
Yeah.
I feel like there's a happy medium in there somewhere that we are getting to slowly but surely.
I hope so.
Yeah,
I
where
hope
we
so.
can all be like, we can discover other people outside of our little cocoon, yet still have places and spaces and communities where we can blend, where we can come
Yeah.
together. And it's not like you were saying, the family can be chosen, and that
Yeah.
can be our community. But that can be our community whether it's online or in a a location, or in a somebody building an intentional community where like-minded people can come in, or whatever that is. But I think the pendulum is kind of, because I did like that when I was growing up. I was in the same type of environment where it was everyone I knew and this, but I still was wanting something else, so I like that idea, but I like the idea of kind of balancing it.
Yeah, and that part of that is what I'm actually a global ambassador for the Backyard Peace Project,
Oh.
is out of Australia, that launched a couple months ago. And it's all about building community, all sorts of different communities. There's a lot in there on, if you want to become more financially savvy, there are master classes on that. Or if you want to do some of that internal work, there are classes on that. And I think it's $29 a month and you get access to everything. There's podcasts, there's
Hmm.
coaching available, which I think is extra, but everybody should check out the Backyard Peace Project because it's something so it's really this brilliant idea that Kathy Dominy came up with, and she just realize that, we can't wait for everybody else to build peace globally. We have to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And so let's invite people in, especially those who maybe need it more than others as far as connection and togetherness and comfort, and find your place.
Yeah, yeah,
Because that there's a lot of people who really need some connection and some support that way.
yeah.
So, yeah, I'm with you. I think if we can find a happy medium, I think that we would be a lot healthier.
Yeah. And also, too, just so you know, I think there's quite a few groups that are putting things like this together because I know someone else who's doing something
Oh,
similar. It's not,
fantastic.
yeah. And what I think in his version of it, it's like $8 or $18 a year. But the way
Mm.
you do it, the more people you get out to, the more it branches out and it pushes out to everybody. So I thought that
Yeah.
was kind of a cool uh, thought process on how to build something like that. But yeah, that's great. And I'm going to put the if you I'm going to put the link. Mhm. I'm going to put the link in the description of that. I'll find
Okay.
it and then and put that in there with everything. And
Yeah.
then the next question I have is, how do you define awakening?
Awakening. That's an interesting question. So I think for me, awakening is when I when I think about something differently, right? So we've all had our beliefs and everything and values and attitudes and how we again believe how we move through the world and what we think we know to be true. And everybody has their own version of that. No
Right.
two, I don't think two are alike. But for me, my awakenings have come when I have had new understanding
Mm.
about myself, about something else, about how I engage with the world. And to me, it's when my light gets brighter,
I like
right?
that. I like that.
And it's because I think, we all carry light with us. And the more we are aware, the more we are learning, the more we have less ego, the more we are humbled
Mhm.
and just to move through the world to learn what we're supposed to be learning. I think I can promise you my light has gotten much brighter since I've been doing a lot of this internal work because it's not dimmed by all the baggage and the self-doubt and the anger and the limitations.
Mhm.
When we
Mhm.
remove those, I think there are awakenings that occur, and they can be very small and they can be quite large,
Yeah.
but I look for the opportunity to learn something new that I that changes how I move through the world.
Yeah.
That's
That's a
that's why I'm here.
yeah, that's like, exactly. That's why the podcast is named Awakening Soul Divinity. So
Yes.
that's why we're here. Yeah,
That's right.
agreed. How can people get in touch with you?
Well, I am all over the place. So I'm on LinkedIn, Gretchen N. Holmes. I have a website, which is www.gretchenholmesphd.com. And those are the two easiest ways to get a hold of me. I am always excited to talk to people. If you go to my website, you can send me an email through there. It also lists my book and where you can get that and my podcast. My podcast is anywhere listen to your podcast. So I that's kind of easier to find the work in between. But you can send me a note in LinkedIn or through my website, and I'm always excited to get an opportunity to connect with people.
Yeah, no, I get that. I love that. Thank you. And all that information will be shared in the description, so you don't have to remember. And finally, Gretchen, is there anything else that you'd like to share before we wrap up?
Yeah, my thing now that I am really committed to is whatever is going on in your life, whether you feel like you're falling short, whether you are screwing up, whether you have lost some ground, whatever it is, my advice to myself and to everyone else is to love yourself harder.
Mm, love
That's it.
yourself harder.
Yeah. Stop beating yourself up. Stop making excuses. Stop shaming yourself. Just love yourself harder. I really think it's the answer, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm doing it too.
Mm-hmm. Because we're worth it.
We are worth it. We're
Absolutely.
absolutely worth it.
Yes.
100%. No
Yeah.
matter what, no matter what the scale says, no matter what your bank account says, no matter what your house looks like, no matter what your car looks like, no matter, doesn't matter. None of that dictates your self-worth. None of it.
None of it dictates the truth of who you are. Either.
No, not even close.
Not
No,
even close. All right.
no.
Well, thank you so much, Gretchen. I appreciate you being here and I really enjoyed this conversation. And everyone, thank you for being here on Awakening Soul Divinity. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you.